What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Jam with Jock. I'm very excited for today's lesson because we're talking about my favorite sound in electronic music, and that is the synth bass. I think it's a sound that is still relevant in today's music, and with these three simple but effective techniques, you'll have your synth bass mastered by the end of this video. I've recreated hundreds of tracks that utilize a synth bass, and I found lots of key takeaways that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. There are three tracks that come to mind with fantastic synth bass, and in recreating these tracks, I learned the most. And that is Holiday by Madonna, Time After Time, Cyndi Lauper, and Borderline by Tame Impala. So if you haven't already, make sure you give those tracks a listen and pay close attention to that synth bass. I just finished a track that utilizes these three techniques, so let's go ahead and jump into Ableton and have a look at some synth bass. Alrighty everyone, so here we are in Ableton. Got the track that I was just talking about, and I've just turned off the synth sounds for the meantime, and I'm just going to keep the drums and the piano so we can get a really good gauge of what this synth bass is actually doing. I'll just play the track for you guys first. Right, so in level one, and what you want to be doing when you're first making your synth bass is actually crafting the sound itself. Now, I've talked about layering many times on this channel, and there is no more important sound to layer than a synth bass. So let's have a look at the three layers that I've got. I've got a sub at the bottom, got my main sound that is going to be helping this stand out at the mix and what you'll be hearing most on the speakers. And then this third layer comes in the second half of the chorus. So if you notice, it's not in this first part and it's coming in this second chorus just to help that synth bass take it to another level in that chorus when we want it to be hitting harder. So I've talked about Trillion many times on this channel. It is my personal favorite and many others go-to bass instrument. And I think it really has a lot of great synth bass presets because the sounds are really fuzzy and have a lot of rich harmonics in Trillion. And so when you're looking for a sub, often I like to look for a sound that is not just a sine wave, a bit more of a sawtooth, it's got lots of harmonics, and then I'm using an EQ to then just get the sub frequencies. That way I still have some of those harmonics lingering around, but I'm just getting that sub frequency. So that's where I'd start. I'd start with a sound that I thought had a lot of good sub frequencies, but also some of that mid-range too. And then I'm getting an EQ, and then you can cut it all the way down to about 100, 150 Hertz, and then you're good to go. The reason I like to have different layers is because I like to mix the individual sounds in their own way. And we'll get into more of that in level 3 where we're going to talk about mixing. But for now, I want you to find a nice buzzy FM sound that really has a lot of character and distinction to it, because this is going to be the sound that is going to be most recognized and heard in your synth bass. So you don't have Trillion and you want to be able to use an Ableton preset, you just look up FM bass and go into instruments. I found that this harsh FM bass does a decent job. I'd say electric FM fuzz bass and the harsh FM bass are the two best presets here. And just by simply throwing on some overdrive, some compression, and maybe some saturation, you can get the sounds quite similar to those Trillion ones. I would highly recommend though investing in some sort of a synth that has the capabilities of more than just the Ableton standalone instruments. So now that we have a sound that we like, we've got a really nice sub frequency that's holding down that bottom end. Now we've got a really enjoyable mid-range, fuzzy FM type of mid-range sound that's really carrying the synth bass. We can now start to go ahead and look at the placement of the notes. So upon recreating lots of my favorite synth basses, I found that the note placements can be broken up into three different categories. And that is the velocity, having octave jumps, and the length of the notes. So if we open up the MIDI to my synth bass, as always, you can just quickly see that I have my chords written down first in ghost notes so I can see them but not hear them. If you've watched this channel before, you know that this is an absolute game-changing tip that makes everything so much easier when you can just see exactly what notes are going to sound good and what won't. So I started on here with the B. And if you see, I've got lots of different note lengths, and I think that just gives the bass a lot of different types of movements. So we've got these long notes when I really want that sustained bass feeling and just a bit of breathing room. And then we've got these jumps, almost like a slap bass, just coming every so often. And then even some octave jumps going all the way higher, just to emphasize those fills at the end of the 4 bars. So I think this is almost the most important part to a synth bass, having lots of different variations in the note lengths, because you can just follow the root notes and you can just have these long sustained notes, and that's going to be great to hold down the track. So by having these smaller bass notes, you're not only giving the synth bass a lot of movement, but you're almost making a melody underneath the track, which is my personal favorite thing about synth basses, how they have a sort of melodic element to them. Now, just to emphasize these small notes and these almost slap basses, I have the velocity turned up on these notes. And I think this is a really subtle technique to do, but it has enormous power behind it because it just really emphasizes those little up and downs. I really wanted this fill at the end of the 16 bars to have a lot of emphasis to it. So I'll just play it through. Listen to the E. So as you can hear, it really helps it pop out of the mix. So if I play it in context with the track now. If you take those 3 things into consideration when you're making your synth bass, and those 3 things are the octave jumps, the velocity, and the note length, then you'll be making some really professional sounding synth bass right away. Alrighty, so the third and final level to mastering your synth bass is mixing process. Now, I talked about this in the first level about why it's so important to layer your sounds. And this is because we can treat them differently in the mix. So for instance, this sub frequency, I haven't got much on because I think Trillion has an awesome sound already. I've got some simple sidechain compression, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. And then obviously the very important EQ that is taking away all of these mid-range and higher range frequencies to just let this sub really punch through. This is optional, but I've actually monoed my bass in the sub layer. And you probably heard on the internet many times people who tell you to mono your bass and people who tell you not to. So I do it, just that's my personal preference. But if you don't like to do that, that's also totally fine. The most important mixing techniques come in this second layer. The layer that I've said at the start is going to be the sound that people hear, the most important layer to your synth bass. And so we're going to mix it as such. So I've got a Pro Q3 that is taking out those sub frequencies because we've got that layer already. And just to be safe, I've got a bass mono on here, but I'm sure it's not doing anything in the first place. We've got our sidechain again, which is very important because we've got that kick that we want to be punching through the mix. And something I love to do is throw some micro shift on the synth bass layer I want to be spread. So if you don't know what micro shift does, is it spreads the audio signal. It makes it wide essentially. So if you're doing that to your sub frequencies, that's not an ideal thing to do because you want your sub to be almost down the center. And so by enhancing the stereo width of the sub frequencies is not something I would suggest to do. So this is why, again, layering is so important because now I can throw the micro shift just on my mid layer I want to be heard. And this is spreading out the signal very nicely. So I'll play it with and without. So it's really spreading it, as you can hear, giving it lots of stereo width. I think this does a really good job of making the synth bass become really strong and powerful because we've got this layer that's not the sub frequencies, it's this middle layer that we're all hearing that is just being spread from left to right and making it sound really powerful. Other than that, I actually don't have any other processing on it because Like I said many times, the Trillion is such a great instrument. I don't think it needs too much processing. If you're using an instrument that doesn't sound as good and you think it needs some sort of tinkering, then I would throw lots of overdrive or saturation, erosion even. Just all of these presets are going to be really good to just giving your synth bass a bit of character, a bit of distortion, and help replicate that Trillion sound that I think is just really spot on. And the third layer is just very simple. It's just taking out those sub frequencies. So once again, that mid-range is just, that's just another mid-range layer to have. I've actually got this pitched up an octave, and that's just so there's a bit of differentiation from this second layer. And because like I said at the start, this is only coming in the second chorus, it's just a really great layer to add, especially with it up an octave. Just give the synth bass some more dynamic range. Okay, so now we've heard the synth bass with the piano, with the drums. I want to add in the synths now so we can hear exactly what the synth bass sounds like in the entire mix. Have it. There's the 3 levels to the perfect synth bass, and I truly hope that you are able to follow along with it and you can create awesome sounding synth bass at home. If you had any questions about the techniques or the track, I'd love if you could drop them down below and I'd be happy to get back to you. If you learned something in this video and you enjoyed it, then please hit that like and subscribe button. And once again, I just want to say a big thank you to staying to the end of the video. If you wanted to go ahead and keep watching my stuff, then I'll leave my latest upload right up there. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next one.